The grand chamber of the Galactic Council echoed with laughter. Not the kind, welcoming sort of laughter that brought people together, but the cruel, mocking kind that tore them apart. At the center of this storm of ridicule stood Captain Thomas Reed, his back straight and his face calm despite the humiliation. A seventh-dimensional drive. The elder speaker's voice boomed through the chamber. His crystalline body sparkled with what passed for amusement among his kind. Humans barely understand the fourth dimension, and here they claim to have mastered the seventh. More laughter followed. Representatives from over 300 species filled the massive amphitheater, their various forms of mirth creating a cacophony of hoots, clicks, and electronic buzzes. Some glowed in different colors to show their amusement, while others vibrated or changed shapes. Reed's fingers tightened slightly behind his back, but his voice remained steady. The United Earth government has achieved this breakthrough after 50 years of research. We are here as a courtesy to inform the Council before we begin our first official test flight. A blob-like being in the front row oozed forward, its translucent body rippling with blue patterns. Even we, the Mist Collective, with 10,000 years of space travel, have only scratched the surface of fifth-dimensional theory. Do you expect us to believe that humans, barely 300 years into spaceflight, have surpassed us all? Reed looked at the data tablet in his hand, then at the massive holographic display behind him showing the basic principles of Earth's discovery. He knew most of them weren't even trying to understand the mathematics. They had already made up their minds. The elder speaker raised one crystalline arm, causing immediate silence in the chamber. Captain Reed, we have tolerated humanity's presence in this council because every species, no matter how primitive, has something to contribute. But this is beyond acceptable. You waste our time with impossible claims. They're not impossible, Reed replied. Dr. Wells and her team have proven. Ah yes, Dr. Anna Wells, interrupted another elder, their form shifting from crystal to liquid and back. The same scientist who claimed that our hyperspace technology was, and I quote, primitive fourth-dimensional paddling. Such arrogance. Reed remembered that day clearly. 6 months ago, Dr. Wells had stood exactly where he stood now. She had tried to explain that what the Council species called advanced hyperspace technology was actually just scratching the surface of dimensional physics. The Council had laughed then too. But Wells hadn't been deterred. She had simply returned to her lab beneath the ice of Europa, working with her team in secret. Sometimes, she had told Reed, being underestimated is our greatest advantage. The elder speaker's voice pulled Reed back to the present. Let us be clear, Captain. If Earth proceeds with this foolish experiment, there will be consequences. The Council cannot allow dangerous and unproven technologies to threaten the stability of our galaxy. Reed nodded slowly, his blue eyes scanning the chamber. Some species looked concerned, others amused, but a few showed something else. Fear, interest. He filed away their reactions for later analysis. We understand the Council's position, Reed said carefully. However, Earth will proceed with the test as planned. We believe the benefits to all spacefaring species will become apparent once. The laughter started again, even louder this time. The elder speaker's crystalline form vibrated with such intensity that small rainbow patterns scattered across the chamber walls. Benefits. The elder wheezed between bursts of laughter. The only benefit will be the amusing reports of your failure. Go, Captain. Go back to your primitive world. Perhaps when your ship fails to achieve the impossible, humans will finally learn their place in the galactic order. Reed bowed slightly, a gesture that could be taken as respectful or mocking, depending on one's perspective. As he turned to leave, his communicator vibrated silently against his wrist. A message from Dr. Wells appeared in his neural display. Archimedes is ready. Dimensional barriers PPD, awaiting your return. A small smile touched the corner of Reed's mouth as he walked out of the chamber, the sound of laughter still echoing behind him. Let them laugh. In 48 hours, everything would change. The galaxy's laughter was about to stop. The ice caves of Europa glowed with soft blue light as Captain Reed made his way through the underground facility. His boots echoed against the metal walkways that stretched through the massive cavern carved deep within the Jovian moon. After the humiliation at the Galactic Council, he needed answers. He found Dr. Wells in her usual spot, the central research chamber. She stood before a massive holographic display, her gray hair tied back in a simple knot, her hands moving through complex equations that floated in the air like luminous smoke. "They laughed, didn't they?" she asked without turning around. The equations spun and reformed under her guidance. "The whole council," Reed confirmed, stepping closer to the display. "Now I need to know, are we really ready for this? Or did I just make humanity look like fools?" Dr. Wells finally turned to face him. Her eyes were bright with excitement, despite having worked for what looked like days without rest. "Let me show you something, Captain." She waved her hand, and the equations vanished. In their place appeared a new image, a simple line. "This is how the Council species sees space travel," she explained. "Forward and backward. Simple. Basic. When they discovered the fourth dimension, they thought they had found something amazing. They called it hyperspace." The line expanded into a cube. But the fourth dimension was just the beginning. "It's like, imagine you're an ant walking on a piece of paper. That's 2 dimensions. If you could suddenly jump up, that would be the 3rd dimension. The Council species are like ants who learned to jump and thought they had discovered everything." Reed nodded slowly. "And we've gone beyond that. Far beyond." The hologram shifted again, showing complex geometric shapes that seemed to fold in on themselves in impossible ways. "The Council's hyperspace drive is like a rowboat. Ours is like, well, there isn't really a comparison. We're not just moving through space, we're moving outside of it." She pressed a button on her console, and a new hologram appeared, the Archimedes. The ship looked deceptively simple from the outside, its smooth silver hull bearing no visible engines or weapons. The real breakthrough wasn't in the technology, Tom. It was in understanding that the universe has rules we never understood because we were looking at them wrong. Walking around the hologram, she continued, "The higher dimensions aren't empty spaces to travel through. They're more like layers of reality stacked on top of each other. What we did was figure out how to slip between those layers." Reed studied the ship's image. "The Council thinks it's impossible. The Council thinks a lot of things are impossible." Wells smiled. "Did you know that according to their scientific models, bumblebees shouldn't be able to fly? They're so convinced by their own knowledge that they can't see past it. But we did something different. We stopped trying to force our way through dimensions and learned to dance with them instead." She brought up another display, this one showing brain scans. "That's why not everyone can crew the Archimedes. We need people whose minds can adapt to perceiving higher dimensions. People like Navigator Morris." "Is that why he keeps winning at 4-dimensional chess?" Reed asked, remembering the quiet navigator who seemed to see patterns no one else could. "Exactly. His mind naturally understands what we had to build machines to see." Wells' expression grew serious. "But there's something else, Captain. Something we discovered during our last test." The hologram changed again, showing energy readings that Reed didn't understand. The Council's reaction. It wasn't just about pride or disbelief. The elders, they seemed afraid. Really afraid. "You think they know something we don't. I think they know exactly what we've discovered, and it terrifies them." Wells shut down the hologram, leaving only the soft blue glow of the ice caves. "The 7th dimension isn't just about travel, Captain. It's about power. The kind of power that could reshape the galaxy. And I don't think the elders want anyone else to have that power." Reed thought back to the council chamber, remembering the strange intensity in the elder speaker's reaction. "How long until we're ready?" "The Archimedes is prepped and waiting. Navigator Morris has already mapped our dimensional course." She smiled again, but this time there was a hint of steel in it. "We can show the galaxy exactly what humanity has achieved. All we need is your order, Captain. Reed looked at the now dark hologram projector, his decision already made. Then let's give them something new to laugh about. The Archimedes looked wrong. That was the only way Navigator Jack Morris could describe it. Even sitting in its massive docking bay beneath Europa's ice, the ship seemed to bend reality around itself. Its silver hull curved in ways that made his eyes hurt, not because the curves were complex, but because they existed in directions human eyes weren't meant to see. Beautiful, isn't she? Lieutenant Maria Torres stood beside him on the observation deck. As the ship's tactical officer, she had spent months training to operate weapons that, technically speaking, didn't exist in normal space. Beautiful like a dream you can't quite remember, Morris replied, his special mind already mapping the ship's higher dimensional aspects. Where others saw a sleek silver vessel about the size of an old Earth aircraft carrier, he saw more. Layers, echoes, possibilities. The entry ramp lowered, and Captain Reed emerged from a briefing room, followed by Dr. Wells and a small team of technicians. Their footsteps echoed through the vast chamber as they approached the ship. Final checks, everyone, Reed announced. We launch in 2 hours. The Council's observation fleet is already gathering in orbit around Jupiter. They're expecting a show. He smiled slightly. Let's not disappoint them. Morris followed the others into the ship. The interior was even stranger than the exterior. Corridors seemed to lead in directions that shouldn't exist, yet somehow made perfect sense to his trained mind. The bridge, when they reached it, was a perfect sphere with stations that oriented themselves to whoever was using them. Navigator Morris, Dr. Wells called as he settled into his station. Please initialize the dimensional mapping array. Morris placed his hands on the neural interface panels. Immediately, his consciousness expanded. Through the ship's sensors, he could perceive the layered structure of reality itself. The normal 3 dimensions appeared as a thin membrane, with the 4th dimension, what the Council called hyperspace, just beyond it. But above that, 7 layers mapped and stable, he reported. The pathway is clear. In his expanded awareness, he could see the routes between dimensions like streams of possibility flowing through the void. Lieutenant Torres spoke from her station, weapons systems online, though I still don't understand how they work. Think of them as probability projectors, Dr. Wells explained while checking the main drive systems. They don't fire energy or matter. They change the likelihood of things happening or not happening in a localized space, like making it very likely that an enemy ship's hull will quantum tunnel itself inside out. Torres asked with a slight grin. Precisely. Though let's hope we don't need to demonstrate that capability. Captain Reed took his place in the command chair, which shifted to accommodate him perfectly. All stations, report readiness. One by one, the crew confirmed their stations. Morris could feel the ship's systems humming to life, not with normal energy, but with dimensional potential. The Archimedes wasn't just a vessel that could travel through higher dimensions. It was partially existing in them already. Sir, Torres called out suddenly. The Council observation fleet. It's larger than expected. I'm counting at least 50 ships, including 3 elder vessels. Reed frowned. That's not an observation fleet. That's a battle group. They're afraid, Dr. Wells said quietly. They know what we've built, or at least they suspect. The elders wouldn't send 3 ships just to watch a failed experiment. Morris felt it through his dimensional sensors. The Council ships were not just watching. They were positioning themselves in a containment pattern. Their weapons, primitive as they were powered up and ready. Should we abort? Torres asked, her hands hovering over her controls. Captain Reed stood up, his expression resolute. No, humanity has spent too long being dismissed, being laughed at. It's time to show them exactly what we've achieved. He turned to Morris. Navigator, plot our course through the dimensional layers. Lieutenant Torres, keep those probability weapons ready, but do not engage unless fired upon. Morris's fingers danced across his interface, mapping their ascension through reality's layers. The ship hummed with power that didn't exist in normal space. All hands, Reed's voice rang through the ship. Prepare for dimensional transition. Let's show the galaxy what happens when they underestimate humanity. The Archimedes began to glow with an impossible light as its systems engage. Above them, through kilometers of ice, the Council fleet waited, their laughter about to turn into something very different indeed. The Archimedes rose through Europa's ice like a ghost passing through a wall. Normal matter simply flowed around it as the ship's dimensional field adjusted local reality. In orbit above Jupiter, 50 Council vessels waited in attack formation, their weapons charged. Beginning dimensional transition, Navigator Morris announced, his voice distant as his mind merged with the ship's sensors. Fourth dimension in 3, 2, 1. The universe flickered. To the Council ship's sensors, the Archimedes simply vanished. But for the human vessel's crew, reality expanded. The normal universe became a flat picture, like a photograph they could step away from. This is what the Council calls hyperspace, Dr. Wells said, watching her instruments. But we're not stopping here. Navigator, proceed to the 5th dimension. Another shift. The crew felt their consciousness stretching. Where the 4th dimension had made 3-dimensional space look flat, the 5th dimension made 4-dimensional space look like a simple line. Council vessels are attempting to follow, Lieutenant Torres reported. They're failing. Their sensors can't even track us anymore. Captain Reed stood from his chair, watching the main display as it showed representations of dimensions human eyes were never meant to see. Take us higher, Navigator. The 6th dimension opened before them. Morris gasped. Here, time itself became visible as patterns of light and shadow. He could see the past and future of nearby space, spreading out like a vast tapestry. But something was wrong. Captain, Morris called out, his voice shaking. We're not alone here. In the swirling chaos of 6th-dimensional space, shapes moved. Not ships or beings as humans understood them, but patterns in reality itself. They were vast, ancient, and very much aware. Impossible, Dr. Wells whispered, staring at her readings. This space shouldn't be inhabited. The math didn't show any signs off. They're trying to communicate, Morris interrupted. His special mind, trained to perceive higher dimensions, was picking up patterns in the chaos. They're singing. The patterns are a language. The bridge crew watched in awe as Morris's station projected the patterns into visible light. Complex geometries danced and shifted, forming messages that bypassed normal space and time. Can you understand them? Reed asked. Morris nodded slowly. They're calling us the new ones. They say we're the first to rise this high since the elders fell. Fell? Torres asked. What does that mean? Before Morris could answer, alarms blared. Above them, in normal space, the elder vessels had done something impossible. They were attempting to force their way up through the dimensions. Multiple dimensional breaches detected, Torres reported. The elder ships, their design is changing. They're revealing their true form. On the main display, the crystalline elder vessels were transforming. Their beautiful geometric shapes were twisting into something darker, something that reminded Reed of deep-sea predators. Now we know why they were so afraid, Dr. Wells said grimly. They weren't afraid we'd fail. They were afraid we'd succeed, afraid we'd discover their secret. The 6th-dimensional being's song changed. Morris translated. They say the elders were like us once, ages ago. They discovered the higher dimensions and used them to conquer. But they couldn't handle the true power. They regressed, became parasites, feeding off lower-dimensional species while preventing them from advancing. Reed's expression hardened. That's why they created the Council, not to unite species, but to control them, to keep them from discovering the truth. The elder ships were getting closer, their weapons charging with energy that could tear through dimensional barriers. But the 6th-dimensional beings weren't done. Their song continued, and Morris's eyes widened as he understood. They want to help us, he said. They're offering to show us how to reach the seventh dimension. They say humanity has proven worthy by coming here not to conquer, but to learn. Your orders, Captain? Torres asked, her hands ready at the weapons controls. Reed looked at the approaching elder ships, then at the beautiful patterns of the sixth-dimensional being song. His next words would determine not just their fate, but possibly the fate of all species trapped under elder rule. Navigator Morris, accept their offer, he commanded. Dr. Wells, prepare the drive. Lieutenant Torres, stand ready. He smiled grimly. It's time the galaxy learned what humanity can really do. The Archimedes began to glow with new energy as the sixth-dimensional being's knowledge flowed into its systems. The seventh dimension beckoned, and with it, the power to change everything. The elder ship's true forms were horrifying to behold. Their crystalline beauty had melted away, revealing dark, twisted shapes that seemed to eat the light around them. Through the Archimedes dimensional sensors, the crew could see what they really were, parasites clinging to the fabric of reality, feeding on the potential of younger races. Incoming transmission, Lieutenant Torres announced. It's the elder speaker. Show us, Captain Reed ordered, standing firm on the bridge. The main screen flickered, and the elder speaker appeared. Gone was the beautiful crystal form. Instead, a mass of writhing darkness filled the screen with multiple eyes that glowed with ancient malice. You have seen too much. The elder speaker's voice had changed too, becoming a deep, grating sound that made the crew's teeth ache. Your species was amusing when you played with simple toys, but now you have gone too far. You've been holding back every species in the galaxy, Reed replied, his voice steady despite the horror before him. Feeding off their potential, stopping them from reaching their true capabilities. A sound like grinding metal filled the bridge. The elders laugh. Of course we have. It is the natural order. The strong feed on the weak. We reached the higher dimensions eons ago, and we learned the truth. Power belongs to those who take it. Dr. Wells stepped forward. You didn't reach the higher dimensions. You invaded them, corrupted them, and when you couldn't handle the true power, you turned parasitic. Clever human, the elder speaker's eyes pulsed with rage. Yes, the seventh dimension rejected us. So we made our own empire in the lower realms. We created the council to farm potential. Every new species that joins provides us with fresh energy to feed upon. Their dreams, their possibilities, their future achievements, all become our sustenance. Navigator Morris spoke up from his station, still connected to the sixth-dimensional being song. The council chambers, the laughter, it wasn't just mockery, was it? It was feeding. You were feeding on our humiliation, our crushed hopes. The sweetest energy comes from crushed dreams, the elder confirmed. Your species provided such delicious meals, always reaching for the impossible, always failing. But now, the dark mass shifted, revealing what looked like weapons growing from its surface. Now you have become a threat. Multiple alarms blared across the bridge. They're charging weapons, Torres reported. Energy signatures unlike anything in our database. They're not just trying to destroy us. They're trying to erase us from all dimensional planes. You could have stayed in your place. The elder speaker's voice filled with cruel amusement. Could have remained amusing pets, providing us with sweet energy for millennia. Instead, you will become an example of what happens to species that reach too far. The screen went dark, but the threat remained. Through the ship's sensors, they could see the other council ships moving away, leaving the 3 elder vessels to deal with the humans. Options? Reed asked, looking at his crew. Dr. Wells checked her readings. The sixth-dimensional beings are still offering their help. With their knowledge, we could reach the 7th dimension. But the transition will take time. Time we don't have with those weapons pointed at us. We can't fight 3 elder ships, Torres added. Even with our probability weapons, they have centuries more experience in dimensional combat. Morris's voice came from his station, distant but clear. Captain, The sixth-dimensional beings are showing me something. The elders, they're not just afraid of us reaching the seventh dimension. They're afraid we'll succeed where they failed. They're afraid we'll show the truth to every species in the council. Reed looked at the tactical display, where the elder ships were moving into attack position. Their dark forms twisted reality around them, preparing to fire weapons that could erase the Archimedes from existence itself. But he saw something else too. Behind the elder ships, at the edge of their sensors, other council vessels weren't running away as ordered. They were watching, waiting, wondering. Dr. Wells, Reed's voice was calm and clear. Begin the transition to the seventh dimension. Lieutenant Torres, prepare defensive measures. Navigator Morris, send a message to every council ship in range. Show them what the elders really are. The elder ships opened fire, their weapons tearing holes in reality itself. But aboard the Archimedes, humanity prepared to show the galaxy the true meaning of power, not power taken by force, but power earned through understanding. The real battle was about to begin. Reality shattered around the Archimedes as the elder weapons struck. Dark energy capable of erasing matter from multiple dimensions at once tore through space. But the human vessel wasn't where it appeared to be. Dimensional displacement successful, Morris called out, his hands dancing across his control panel. We exist in 3 different dimensional planes simultaneously. The bridge crew watched in awe as their ship seemed to split into 3 versions of itself, each one operating in a different layer of reality. The elder weapons passed harmlessly through 2 of the images, while the third slipped between dimensions entirely. Probability weapons online, Torres reported, her fingers moving with practiced precision. But they're different now. The sixth-dimensional being's knowledge has changed them. Captain Reed stood at the center of the bridge, watching as space itself became a battlefield. Show me. Torres activated the weapons. Instead of conventional energy beams or projectiles, waves of pure probability rippled out from the Archimedes. Where they struck the first elder ship, reality itself rebelled. Parts of the dark vessel began existing and not existing at the same time. Their dimensional armor is failing, Dr. Wells announced, studying her readings. The weapons aren't just attacking their ships, they're attacking the very possibility of their ships existing. The elder vessels responded with another barrage. Space turned inside out as their weapons tried to erase the Archimedes from every possible timeline. But Morris's dimensional navigation kept them shifting between layers of reality, impossible to pin down. Message from the council ships, Torres said suddenly. They're asking for proof. They want to see what we see. Reed nodded. Show them. Show them everything. Morris channeled the ship's sensors, broadcasting the true vision of the elder vessels to every council ship in range. The response was immediate. Gasps and cries of horror filled the communications channels as species after species saw their leaders for what they really were. The elders are trying to jam our broadcast, Wells reported, but it was too late. The truth was spreading. The second elder ship moved to attack, its form twisting into something even more nightmarish. But as it charged its weapons, something unexpected happened. 3 council ships broke formation and opened fire on it. More ships are joining in, Torres called out excitedly. The council fleet is turning against the elders. But the elder vessels were far from defeated. Their dark forms merged together, creating a singularity of pure dimensional energy. The void they created began pulling at the fabric of reality itself. They're trying to collapse all dimensional planes in this sector, Wells shouted over the sound of straining engines. If they succeed, they'll destroy everything, including themselves. Can we stop them? Reed asked, gripping his chair as reality buckled around them. Morris's voice came back, strangely calm. The sixth-dimensional beings are showing me the way. We don't need to fight the collapse. We need to ride it, straight into the seventh dimension. That's insane. Torres protested. We'll be torn apart. No, Wells said, suddenly understanding. The elders failed to reach the seventh dimension because they tried to force their way in. They tried to break reality. But we can do what they couldn't. We can let reality itself show us the way. Reed looked at his crew, then at the swirling dimensional collapse that threatened to destroy everything. Do it. Morris engaged the drive, but differently now. Instead of fighting against the dimensional tides, the Archimedes began to move with them. The ship's multiple dimensional echoes synchronized, merging into something new. All Council ships, Reed broadcast, pull back to safe distance. What happens next will change everything. The Elder Vessel's attempt to destroy reality had created exactly what humanity needed, a gateway to the seventh dimension. As their ship began to transform, the crew felt their consciousness expanding beyond anything they had experienced before. They were about to show the galaxy what happened when humanity didn't just reach for the impossible, but embraced it completely. The Archimedes began to glow with a light that existed in all dimensions at once, preparing for its final transformation. The real power of the seventh dimension was about to be unleashed. The seventh dimension unfolded around the Archimedes like a flower made of light and possibility. The ship no longer looked like a vessel. It had become a nexus of pure dimensional energy, existing everywhere and nowhere at once. The entire crew felt the change. Their consciousness expanded beyond the limits of normal space and time. Through their new awareness, they could see everything, past, present, future, and all possibilities in between. "This is what the elders couldn't achieve," Morris whispered, his mind connected to both the ship and the higher dimensions. "They tried to conquer this realm, but it can only be understood through harmony." The Elder Vessel's dark forms writhed in what could only be described as panic. Their attempt to collapse reality had failed, and now they faced something they had never expected: humans who had achieved what they could not. Captain Reed's voice echoed across all dimensional planes as he addressed not just the Council fleet, but every species in range of their transmission. "For centuries, the Elders have fed on our potential. They created the Council not to unite us, but to farm us. Today that ends." The Archimedes moved, not through space, but through possibility itself. With a thought, they projected the complete truth to every Council species, showing them not just what the Elders were, but what every race could become. The power was always within each species, Dr. Wells explained through the ship's communications. The Elders didn't just feed on our energy. They fed on our dreams, our hopes, our potential to reach the higher dimensions. They kept us down because they feared we might succeed where they failed. The Elder Vessels attacked in desperation, launching weapons that could erase entire timelines. But in the seventh dimension, the Archimedes was beyond such attacks. The weapons passed through spaces where the ship might have been, hitting nothing. Lieutenant Torres watched her tactical display in amazement. The Council ships, they're all changing. Every species is beginning to see the dimensional layers. She was right. As the truth spread, ship after ship began to resonate with new understanding. The Elders' control was breaking, not through force, but through enlightenment. "You destroy everything." The Elder Speaker's voice boomed across dimensions, its form now a twisted mass of dark energy. "The natural order was never natural," Reed interrupted. "It was a cage you built to feed your own fears." He turned to Morris. "Show them what real power looks like." The Archimedes pulsed once, not with a weapon, but with pure understanding. The Elder Vessels froze as seventh dimensional energy washed over them. Their dark forms began to crack, light pouring through the fissures in their dimensional armor. "We're not going to destroy you," Reed announced. "That's what you would do. Instead, we're going to do something far more powerful. We're going to show mercy." The seventh dimensional energy continued to pour through the Elder ships, not destroying them but transforming them. Their twisted forms began to revert, the corruption of centuries burning away in the light of true understanding. Around them, the Council fleet watched in awe as the mighty Elders were stripped of their parasitic powers. What remained were beings much like any other, no longer mighty predators, but simply one more species with the potential to grow. To all Council species, read broadcast as the light of revelation spread from ship to ship. The barriers are gone. The cage is broken. Each of you has the potential to reach the higher dimensions in your own way, at your own pace. Humanity offers not conquest, but partnership. Not control, but understanding. The response was immediate. Ships from hundreds of species began broadcasting messages of support, of wonder, of gratitude. The laughter that had once mocked humanity was replaced by calls for cooperation and shared growth. In the center of it all, the Archimedes hung suspended in seventh-dimensional space, a beacon of what was possible when intelligence was tempered with wisdom and power with compassion. "Orders, Captain," Torres asked, as the former elder ships drifted powerless before them. Reed smiled. "Send word to Earth. Tell them to prepare for guests. We had a lot of teaching to do." He looked out at the gathered fleet, at the species now awakening to their true potential, and a lot to learn ourselves. The age of the elders was over. The era of true galactic cooperation was about to begin, and it had started, ironically enough, because they had laughed at humanity's dreams. No one was laughing now.